last word on the line. And it's maybe about 7 or 8 lines up from the bottom. And it's Minolan de Betfila. Where do we know that this is in Tefillah? And let me just mention that the Gemara had just answered, why do we call it Gvurais Keshamim? The Gemara brought a few psukim, a few verses. One verse was talking about rain. One verse was talking about creation of the world. And both of those verses say the word Cheker. And then there's a third verse that mentions by creation of the world, Gevura, strength. So if by creation of the world it says Gevura, so the same thing will apply to rain, that there's a concept of Gevura. Gevura is Geshamim. We talk about the strength of rain. What the Gemara seems to be implying is that this is a praise for Hashem when we emphasize the concept of Gevura is Geshamim. We're not just saying rain, but we're saying this is like Hashem's strength. This is it shows Hashem's Gevuras Geshamim. So it's the strength of rain. So it seems in the Mishnah they seem to they call it Gevuras Geshamim. Of course, the connection to davening is that in davening we actually say it in the bracha of Ata Gibor. In the bracha of Ata Gibor, you are strong, Hashem. And in that bracha, we mention Mashiv Haruach Amarit Geshem, that Hashem gives rain. So that so those two ideas seem to be based on the fact that rain is connected to Gvura, and we have it in the Mishnah, and we have it in our davening as well in the Ata Gibor, and it's based on these psukim that it's called Gvurais Geshamim, Hashem's Gvura, Hashem's strength. Now, really, that leads us into one more point, and that is something that I mentioned, and that when we mention rain, we say Mashiv Haruach Umarid HaGeshem. We use the word Geshem. Geshem is a term for rain that could mean good rain or bad rain, because even good rain, even bad rain is still Hashem's strength. So we say Mashiv Haruach Umarid HaGeshem. We're showing Hashem's strength. We're not specifically asking for rain. We're just emphasizing how great Hashem is, that He pours down rain. He's Moirid HaGeshem. We don't say give us Geshem. When we ask for rain, we say, give us matar. Matar is always good. But Geshem is sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's always the strength of Hashem. So in the bracha Bata Gibor, when we're talking about Hashem's strength, we don't have to say matar. We say Mashav Baruch Geshem, because Geshem could mean good rain or bad rain, and it's always Hashem's strength. Yes, Ben.
I thought we learned matar is the first rain.
No, Yoira or Malkoish.
Oh, Yoira. Okay.
Malkoish. Yoira is the first rain. Malkoish is the late rain. There is also a concept by it's called Gvura, that Hashem's Gvura is emphasized in the rain, because the Gvura is the concept of the rain didn't want to come on earth. It wants to be in heaven with Hashem, but Hashem, so to speak, forces it to come down here on earth, even though it's not close to Hashem. Based on a medrash, the medrash says that the lower waters and the upper waters were separated. Hashem separated the waters. The lower waters were jealous, and so the upper waters are when they come down, they're really not interested in coming down to rain, and so there's an element of gvura over there, because they really don't want to come down, according to the opinion that the rain comes from the heavenly waters. So basically, that rain is all excited to be close to Hashem. In fact, the lower waters are jealous, and Hashem tried to appease them by telling them that you'll have salt will be brought on the karbanos, and you'll be poured on the mizbeach for sukkos. But the upper waters don't want to come down, so there's an element of gvura there, when the pouring causing the rain to fall. So there's some there's some insight like that. Okay, so getting back to the Gemara, we're on Umanolan de Betfila, and let me tell you, on the art scroll, we are on 2A3. Umanolan de Betfila, and how do we know that this should be done in the davening? Again, we're mentioning the rain, and we we said that the rain, the source of mentioning rain is based in Rosh Hashanah, because in Rosh Hashanah it mentioned B'chag and Sukkot. We are judged by rain, about the rain. We're judged about the rain, and that taught us that we are obligated in asking for rain, since we're being judged on rain. We see from there that we need to mention this. We need to mention rain in our davening, come for bracha. In other words, if we're being judged on rain, so this would definitely be appropriate to ask to mention rain in our davening. So we want the rain to come properly, and so the question of the Mishnah was, when do we do that? And the Gemara asks, but how do we know that it should be done in the davening? Maybe it should be any time of the day. So the Gemara says, the Tanya, because we learned in a brisa. What does it say in the brisa? This is in the second paragraph of Shema, to love Hashem your God and to serve him with all your heart. So what is that referred to? What's serving Hashem with your heart? That's prayer. Many people don't think that. They think that prayer is with your lips. But the thing is, it's supposed to be with your heart. We're not supposed to just be saying the words. We're supposed to be thinking, feeling it. And this is the Avodah Shabalev. This is davening. Davening is the service of the heart. That means the heart has to be feeling when you're davening. And what does it say right afterwards? It says afterwards, and I will give the rain of your land be'itoy in its time, yoira umalkush, the early rains and the late rains. So in the davening is supposed to be the mention of rain. Hashem says he's going to give the rain, and we talk about to serve Hashem with your heart right near it. So it's an implication. It implies that we should be mentioning the rain in the Shemona Esrei. The next Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, there are three keys in the hands of Hashem, and they weren't given over to the hands of a shliach. Hashem is, so to speak, micromanaging these three things. And what are they? The Elohein, Maftech Shel Geshamim, the key to rain, Maftech Shel Chaya, the key to childbirth, Maftech Shel Tchias HaMesim, and the key to resurrection of the dead. These three keys. These three keys are the keys that Hashem is holding on to. And the Gemara says, Maftech Shel Geshamim, the key of rain. How do we know that? T'chsiv, as it says in a verse, Yiftach Hashem l'cha, Hashem will open for you, as a tzoray hatoiv, es Hashemayim. Hashem will open his good storage house, the heavens, to give the rain of your land in its time. Why does it say Hashem will Yiftach Hashem l'cha? So it's emphasizing that Hashem is still holding that key. Maftech Shel Chaya, the key of childbirth. How do we know? Because it says Rachel. Hashem remembered Rachel. By Yishma, next page, 2b. Yishma Elah Elikim, and Hashem listened to her. By Yiftach Es Rachama, and he opened her womb. So the emphasis is that it keeps saying Hashem's name in these psukim, so emphasizing that it's Hashem himself and not a emissary. And she was barren until now, and now she's Hashem listened to her prayer, and he opened her womb, and that's the key to childbirth. And Maftech Shel Tchias HaMesim, the key of resurrection of the dead. Minayin, how do we know that Hashem himself is doing it and he's not giving it over to an agent? D'chsiv, as it says, Vayidatem ki anei Hashem, you should know, I am Hashem b'fischi es kivreisechem, when I open your graves, which is referring to the time of Tchias HaMesim, a pasuk in Yechezkel, and it's that Hashem himself is going to do the Tchias HaMesim. We had a whole discussion because Teves' question, the famous question, Rashi also seems to be bothered with this question. He sort of hints to an answer, the question of the fact that the Nevi'im, we do find that they did hold the key to rain at certain times, and they did hold the key to resurrection,
Life.
the key to resurrection. So Taisus asks, what about Eliyahu and Elisha? And he says that
at least two.
I'm sorry.
Didn't they hold at least two?
Yeah.
And then when they asked for the third one, he said, "No, that can't happen. You'd have to give me back one. So if I were to give it back to you, if I were to give it to you."
That I'm not familiar with that discussion, but the way Teves explains it is that it says they weren't given to a shliach. It doesn't mean they never were given. It means that they weren't given to permanently. They weren't given as a permanent. Once in a while, they had it. Now the other answer is that Rashi seems to hint to is that they weren't all three given at one shot, which sounds like what Ezra is saying, but I don't know of such a story where Hashem told them, "Give back one so that we could give you the others." That I didn't see here, but the way Rashi answers it is that that they weren't given at one time all three of them, and then there's another answer that we mentioned, a very interesting answer, that these three keys never given to an emissary, but certain tzaddikim and neviim, they reach such a high level of dveikus to Hashem that it wasn't like they were given to them. They were, in some sense, so attached to Hashem that it was like Hashem holding on to it, and Hashem was still holding it. They were just one with Hashem, so they were so attached to Hashem that they were able to move the key, to turn the key, but not that Hashem gave it to them, just that they were attached to Hashem, such a high level of attachment that were very a high level that these Nevi'im reached. Okay, and then the Gemara continues and says, "B'ma'arava Amri," in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, they said, "Av maftech shel parnasa," even the key to parnasa, as it says, "Pesach es yadecha," that open your hand, and maspiel chochai rotzain is the end of that pasuk, and implying that Hashem opens his hand and he gives parnasa. Interesting, the pasuk doesn't actually say Hashem's name, but it implies it's talking to Hashem that you have to open your hand. That's yodecha. If it was just an emissary, it could have just said, "Give us, share with us," or whatever. But open your hand, so it's implying like it's all, like it's Hashem Himself doing it. And the question is, so why didn't they count that? Why didn't they count that among the three and add it, make it four? Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan include that in his statement? So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan, my time like a chashiv. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan count it? Like a chashiv laha. Why didn't he count this? Amalach, he tells you geshamim hainu parnasa, that the term geshamim is inclusive, and it also includes parnasa. It includes sustenance. So the basically we have these four keys, and these keys are it's brought down that the acronym of mafteach is matar, parnasa, tchias hamesim, and chaya. That the acronym of the word key is these four things that are in the hands of Hashem, that Hashem is holding the key to. Okay, the next Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Miyom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, from the first day of Sukkot, that's when you start mentioning the rain. So this is a new Gemara now. New Gemara. We had a machlekes in the Mishnah, 3 opinions. We have Rabbi Eliezer says you start from the first day of Sukkot. Mashiv Baruch Mar Geshem. Rabbi Yeshua says from the last day of Sukkot. And they had a debate in the Mishnah. They had a dialogue in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yeshua says, well, if it rains on Sukkot, it's a bad sign. Rabbi Yeshua said, so that's Rabbi Yeshua's claim. Rabbi Eliezer said, yeah, I'm not saying to ask for rain. I'm only saying to mention rain. And and you mentioned that that Hashem should cause it to, that Hashem makes it rain in its time. I'm not saying he makes it rain in general. He makes it rain in its time. So he gives rain in its time. That's what I'm talking about. So then Rabbi Yeshua answered him back and says, if so, you should always mention rain. Now, and then later on in the Mishnah, it mentioned Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that it's similar to Rabbi Yeshua, that you start on the last day of Sukkot, but however, it's the Musaf part, not the Shachris or the Ma'ariv. It's the Musaf part. So Rabbi Yeshua obviously doesn't hold that. Rabbi Yeshua, because otherwise it would be the same opinion. Rabbi Yeshua must hold that you start somewhere Shachris or Ma'ariv mentioning rain. Rabbi Yehuda, at the end of the Mishnah, he's the one who follows this, that you always start on the Musaf. The Musaf guy is the one who starts the mention of rain. And we actually follow that we start on Musaf, mentioning rain. So we have a 3-way machlekes in our Mishnah, and it does, the Mishnah is going to deal, the Gemara is now going to deal with Rabbi Eliezer. Where does he get his source from to start on the first day of Sukkot? And actually it will have ramifications. If he learns it from one place, that means you would start at Ma'ariv. If he learns it from another source, it means you would start at Shachris or Musaf. So it's a little, the question the Gemara is asking has a few, has more than not just asking that question, but it actually has other consequences. So the Gemara now says, Rabbi Eliezer, Eliezer says you start on the first day of Sukkot, mentioning rain, praising Hashem for rain. The Bnei Yeshiva asked this question. Rabbi Eliezer, Mehecha Gamerla. Rabbi Eliezer, where does he get this from? From where does he learn this? Gamar, Milulav Gamerla, I mean, Chamayim Gamerla. Does he learn it from lulav, or does he learn it from the pouring of the water? On Sukkot, there's a pouring of water. And if there's a pouring of water, that might be a reason to ask for rain, to mention rain. But there's also the lulav. The lulav we know is grows on water, needs a lot of water to grow. And the other species that they are in need of much water, and therefore it could be that his mention of rain is based on the lulav. So the Gemara asks, what does he learn it from? Lulav Gamarla, I mean, does he learn it from lulav to mention rain, or does he learn it from the Nisach Hamayim, the pouring of the water? And as we explained, that they would bring carbonis on Sukkot, and the carbon tamid, the regular daily carbon, they would always have a wine libation. And on Sukkot, it also had a water libation. Now, that water libation might be the reason why there might be a source for Rabbi Eliezer to mention the rain, or the lulav, the shaking of the lulav might be a source for Rabbi Eliezer to mention the rain. So the Gemara says, Milulav Gamarla. This is the second word, the second time around. It says Milulav Gamarla. Milulav Gamarla, if he learns it from lulav, ma lulav bayom afaskar bayom, just like the lulav, when do you start shaking the lulav? By day. So the same thing would be, you don't shake it at night. So the same thing would be that you would mention the you would mention the Masha Baruch Mara Geshem in the morning Shemana Esrei, Shachris. That would be the understanding that if you learn it from Lulav, then you start saying it in the Shachris Shemana Esrei. It's a hefsek. How do you start in Shachris? The person announcing it will make a hefsek, will make an interruption. How could he start in Shachris? How could Rabbi Eliezer hold that? So Rabbi Eliezer obviously holds that when it comes to something that's a necessity, you'd be allowed to make a hefsek, like something important. That for the Tzarech HaTfilah, you could make a hefsek and announce Masha Baruch Mer Geshem even in Shachris. That would be Rabbi Eliezer's view. We don't follow that. That would be Rabbi Eliezer's view, and you'd start in the Shachris. That's if he learns it from Lulav. Dilmar, maybe Nisach Hamayim Garmala, maybe he learns it from Nisach Hamayim. And this is interesting that from Nisach Hamayim, if he learns it from the water libation, Ma Nisach Hamayim Orta, just like the Nisach Hamayim starts at night, the night before, because that's when they draw the water. And Damar Marika says, and some have a version with this statement in it, some don't. Some that it said that Master said in Menchasam and Eskem Afila Balayla, that the Menachos and the Nesachim could even be brought at night, which really means the second night. And but they're not limited to daytime. In other words, the Menachos and the Nesachim, they could be Menachos and Eskem Afila Balayla, could even be brought afterwards. And it applies at night. So that would mean that Afaz Kara Mayorta, also the mentioning of the Mashiv Haruach Merda Geshem could be done at night. So in other words, if you learn it from Lulav, the consequence is it means that you start in morning. Because we don't know what Rebbe Lezer really holds. When do you start mentioning Mashiv Haruach Merda Geshem? You learn it from Lulav, so then it has to be by daytime. If you're learning it from Nisach Hamayim, then it would seem it could even be at night. So Tashma, coming here, Damar Rebavo, that Rebavo says, Loilimda Rabbi Eliezer Elami Lulav. Rabbi Eliezer says clearly that Rabbi Avo says clearly that Rabbi Eliezer learned it from Lulav, and that would mean that it only starts, you only start mentioning it by the morning, by Shachris. That's when you would mention Masha V'ruach Mar Geshem and Yishman Esrei, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the first day of Sukkot at Shachris. Some say that, how did Rabbi Avo know this? He had a tradition, a Gemara Gomerla. He had a tradition that Rabbi Eliezer learns it from Lulav. Or some say that he heard a Brisa, and that the Brisa basically says that Rabbi Eliezer learned it from Lulav. So that's the thing. That Rabbi Eliezer holds that you start mentioning rain, it's Shachris, he learns it from Lulav. So Lulav is only by daytime. You don't walk around at night with the Lulav. You don't shake the Lulav at night, no mitzvah. So the same thing is, Masha V'ruach Mer Geshem is connected to Lulav. And as we mentioned earlier, that the Lulav, it says it's impossible to have any of the four species without water, and these species come to be meratze on water. They come to appease Hashem, to give us water, and therefore it's connected to the lulav. So,
Rabbi, why don't we shake the lulav at night?
Why don't we shake the lulav at night?
Because you would think that sooner the mitzvah could be done,
I mean,
you would do it as fast as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'yom harishon, l'kachton lachem v'yom harishon, pre Yitzchok." That's basically a pasuk. I think that it says v'yom. So we only do it by daytime. The mitzvah is by daytime, basically.
Okay, I get it.
Pretty much like that's the mitzvah. The mitzvah applies by day.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
If the lulav and etrog grow before Sukkot, and they grow, why would they determine that based on the, on Sukkot? Why would Rabbi Eliezer determine that on Sukkot on the first day during Shachrit? Because it doesn't grow just over a few weeks. These grow priorly, so there has to be rain priorly in order to grow the lulav and etrog. There has to be rain to make those grow priorly,
Yeah. Yeah.
even
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
They've
Then
already
it
been grown
starts
by
a
the
year
time you
earlier.
purchase them. By the time you purchase them, they're already grown.
So the point is that we're not asking Hashem to make these species grow. What we're asking Hashem to do is give us rain for everything. And by using the lulav, by taking the lulav for a mitzvah, this is the way we awaken Hashem's mercies and Hashem's benevolence to want to give us rain. So again, you would be right if we were asking Hashem that we want a lulav, we want rain to have a lulav, but we're not. We're asking Hashem really for rain in general. So shaking the lulav is a means of telling Hashem, look, we really need a lot of rain. And so we use the lulav, and we even base our time of mentioning rain, praising Hashem for rain, based on the lulav, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Again, we don't follow this view, but that's the meaning behind it. Okay, so the Gemara continues and says, what is the brisa? So if he has a tradition that's how he knows the law of mentioning rain from lulav, fine. So we have a tradition. That's it. But if he heard it from a brisa, where is that brisa? What is that brisa? So what is that brisa that some say that he heard a brisa? So Maihi, what is that brisa? Where is that brisa? The Tanya, because we learn in a brisa, it's taught in a brisa, when do we mention about the rain in the davening? Rabbi Eliezer says, he doesn't say the first day of Sukkot. He says when you start taking the lulav, that's when you start asking for rain. So you see clearly he already right here, the first line of the brisa already basically tells us that it's connected to the lulav. That mentioning rain is connected to the lulav. Rabbi Yeshua says at the time when you put down the lulav, and we had a lot of discussion what exactly that means, because there's a contradiction in Rashi. A few places say the seventh day you put it down. Some places says it means the eighth day because you put it down at the end of the seventh day. Could be they held the lulav all day in those days. Nowadays we shake our lulav and we put it away after davening, but it could be in the olden days they used to walk around with the lulav and esrog. So when you put it down, the end of the seventh day means the eighth day, maybe. So there's someone to reconcile Rashi contradiction. If it means seventh and eighth day, that really Rabbi Yeshua means to say that you start asking for rain on the eighth day, and which would mean Shmini Atzeres. And when he says you put down the lulav, it means because you put it down at the seventh day, and now you no longer are holding it by the eighth day. Although there is Rashis that say seventh day, which make it sound like he's saying the Ishana Rabbah is when you would start mentioning rain, and not Shmini Atzeres. According to this brisa, again, the Mishnah. We know what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said that Rabbi Yeshua holds that you mention rain. You mention the Mashav Baruch Mera Geshem on Shmini Atzeres. That was our Mishnah. But the brisa it brings Rabbi Yeshua here, and he says it's when you put down the lulav and esrog, which might either mean Shana Rabbah, or it might mean the Shmini Atzeres. So the Gemara continues over here, and it says,
question on Hoshana Rabbah. The
Yeah.
fact is that you don't put down your lulav depending on your traditions, because we normally do Hoshanot after Musaf, which means that the earliest that you can say, Mashiv Rachmat Geshem would be in Mincha.
Interesting. So you're saying if you do Hoshana Rabbah, what it would mean would be Mincha time you would start if that's the because you still hold it after Musaf. Now it's interesting because the Nusa the other minhagim, the other traditions on do Hoshana before Musaf.
Almost.
So
Okay. Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. You're right.
It would actually fit better with them because Musaf is would be a good time to switch over. But it could be that.
No,
but,
you're
but,
right. You're right. You're right. My
but
mistake. I'm going back. I'm going back and thinking about what we do in our tradition. We normally do a
Yeah.
shanot, and then after that we do.
Well, it's both. They're two benhagim. So not neither of them are really right. They're both acceptable minhagim. But can you say anything based on this Gemara? Does it prove either of those minhagim is what they used to do there? And I guess it's possible to learn it either way. I mean, when you hold seven, the problem is it's such a contradiction here. So it's that they're all dealing with it. What it really how to explain this 7 and 8 option. But let me just pull it up over here and see. If anyone mentions what you just said,
And they wouldn't because it was my mistake. Normally, when you finish with the lulav and etrog, and then you do when you hit the avot on the ground, all of that is before you do musaf. So musaf would be the earliest that you can do it on
Ashkenaz. No, Ashkenaz. Oh, you're saying on no Hoshana on
Hoshana Rabbah, which is the
Oh.
seventh day.
Oh, Hoshana Rabbah. Even the Ashkenaz does it before Musaf. They don't do it after Musaf. The Hoshanas on Hoshana Rabbah. They do it by Kriyas Torah. See, I don't know the Nusach Ashkenaz. I'm not sure.
Well, it depends.
Interesting.
I mean, I've been where they've done it. All of that was done was done after the Torah reading, but before Musaf, and then Musaf would be the first time that you could say it if it was Hoshana Rabbah.
So you're saying even Ashkenaz that all week long they do Hashanos after Musaf, but
No, there are different minhagim because for example, I give you an example. The early minyan at Young Israel does it all at once, so that you pick up the lulav and etrog, and then you finish with it, and you put it down, and then you're finished. The later minyan had the minhag of waiting until after Musaf, and then doing the Hoshanot after Musaf. And that was the minhag. I mean, it's been changed now with the new Rav, but that's what it was. And it's the same way. I mean, in my machzor, that's the way that the Sephardim do it. That they wait until after Musaf, then they say the Hoshanot, and then they finish davening. So.
Oh, so I didn't know that Sephardim also do that. They wait till they do it after they nusach the real Sephardic minhag is to do it after Musaf. And the question only is, so is Hoshana Rabbah change? Does Hoshana Rabbah change that minhag on Hoshana Rabbah? Do they change, or they also do it after? Does Hoshana Rabbah make a change in that?
Right.
We'll have to look into that. In any event, yeah, it's a little unclear. Again, the whole opinion is very unclear what Rabbi Yeshua says, but I'll try to look it up, see if the commentaries discuss this minhag. That's interesting that you brought up. Okay, so
Rabbi,
yeah.
I don't know if this is related to the seventh day, the eighth day. He says over here by Rabbi Steinsaltz, it says Rashi and Tosfos debate the interpretation of the phrase from the time one puts down the lulav. It may refer to the seventh day of Sukkot after the davening, when the lulav is usually put down for the last time. Alternatively, as the obligation to take the lulav could be fulfilled throughout the day, the time that the lulav is put down might refer to the end of the seventh day. So according to this, it could be the time of putting down the lulav is at the start of the eighth day.
Yeah. I mentioned that's an option of reconciling it, that it means the end of the seventh, and it basically means the beginning of the eighth. But not everyone agrees with that. Again, it's an argument in the commentaries, even within understanding Rashi is a whole argument. What does Rashi really hold? So, but that is one way of learning it, as I mentioned. Yeah, thank you, David. So so the Gemara continues, and it says we have this brisa here that tells us, well, the main reason we brought the brisa was because of Rabbi Eliezer. We wanted to know where he learns it from. Where does he learn about mentioning the rain? Where does he get it from? Is it from Nisach HaMayim, from the water libation, or is it because of shaking the lulav? And the brisa basically tells us it's from the lulav. Now, once we brought the brisa, we bring the whole brisa. And the brisa brings Rabbi Eliezer's view, Rabbi Yeshua's view, that when you put it down. Now, the dialogue begins. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Hoyol Barbas Minam Halalu. So Rabbi Eliezer says, since these four species, Einon Boyin Elo L'Ratzi Salamayim, they only come in order to beg to appease Hashem or ask Hashem for a favorable judgment on water. So Kshem Sha'arba Minam Halalu, Efshar Behem B'lei Mayim, just like these four species, it's impossible for them to grow without water. So it's also impossible for the world. Kachi Efshar Li'olam B'lei Mayim. It's also impossible for the world without water. So the statement of Rabbi Eliezer is what he's trying to tell Rabbi Yeshua is, why don't you want to agree with me that you should mention rain when you're during Sukkot, when you're shaking the lulav, because it's a connection of getting a favorable judgment about rain. Because the lulav is connected, the four species are all about getting Hashem favorable judgment from Hashem about the rain. So mention the rain. This would be the opportune time. Mention it. This is when we're being judged for rain. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua says, but the rain on the Sukkot is only a simon, is a bad sign. Of course, it means Hashem is kicking you out. You're trying to serve Hashem by sitting in the sukkah, and Hashem is pouring water and kicking you out. So it's a bad sign. It's a simon klal, a sign of curse. So
it's on 2b2.
Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer, so Rabbi Eliezer says back that I didn't tell you to ask for rain. I'm just saying mention it. This is the opportune time to mention praise of Hashem about rain. The same way you mentioned Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, all year round, and it only applies in its time when it actually happens. So so also you can mention rain all year round, and when it's meant to come, it'll come. When it's meant to come, it'll, that's when its time is. But the fact that you mention it all year round is not a problem. It's just like Teves Mason. You can mention all year round. Mention it all year round. Now this takes it a step further. The dialogue from the Mishnah, from to where to the Brisa, because in the Mishnah they had a dialogue, and in the Mishnah the Rabbi Eliezer basically said, "I'm not telling you to ask. I'm just saying mention rain, praise Hashem, that He brings rain in its time." So Rabbi Yeshua answered him back, if so, you should always mention it all year round. Now, he didn't answer that. We don't find him answering that so clearly in the Mishnah. There is one way of learning the Mishnah that he does answer it, and in the Mishnah, his answer is that you only mention rain near the time for rain. So that's the next statement in the Mishnah, which is a vague statement. The Gemara has two ways of understanding it. We'll see later in the Gemara. So there could be one more part to the dialogue in the Mishnah, that you mention rain only close to rain. That would be Rabbi Eliezer's statement. But the Brisa has a different way how Rabbi Eliezer continues the discussion, and Rabbi Eliezer says that you're right. You could mention it all year round. There's no problem. I'm only talking about mentioning it. I'm not saying ask for it, and mentioning it, just like Tchias HaMesim all year round, so also mentioning it. You can mention it all year round. And lefichach, therefore, in bala haskir kol hashana kula maskir. So Rabbi Eliezer basically says, if you want, you could mention it all year round. So this is the dialogue of the Brisa, which spells it a little, it goes into it a little more than we did in the Mishnah. Now the Gemara will we'll see later how it really continues. Now Rebbe says, when you stop asking, that's when you stop mentioning, which basically means, when do you stop asking for rain? You stop asking for rain on Pesach. So at the same time, you stop mentioning rain, also Pesach. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says that now when he says that when you stop asking, you still, one second. Let's just go back to that sentence of Rebbe. Rebbe says when you stop asking, you stop mentioning. So the understanding is, and this is the way Rashi brings it, that that you can't mention all year round because when you stop asking, that's when you do have to stop mentioning. You can't do the all year round option. In other words, Rebbe is coming to say that Rabbi Eliezer says you could do it all year round. It's not true. It only works in the winter. But in the summer, you can't do that. And since you can't do it all year round, Rebbe is basically saying, so also on Sukkot, you also shouldn't do it. Since you definitely can't do it since Rebbe says you can't do it all year round, when you stop mentioning, when you stop asking, you have to stop mentioning. So therefore, the same thing should apply, that on Sukkot, you shouldn't be mentioning it either. It's not appropriate to mention it. It's a simon. So since there are times when you don't do it, you shouldn't do it on Sukkot either. In other words, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's like a freebie. It's like a free-for-all. Mention it anytime you want. Rebbe says, no, there's certain times you definitely can't mention it. If there are certain times you definitely can't mention it, that means that there's limitations on it. If you can't do it in the summer, so then there are limitations on it, and therefore, in other words, it has some type of a impact on the rain. In other words, it's causing Hashem to want to give you rain at this time, and if it's not appropriate for rain, then you shouldn't be mentioning it. And the same thing applies on Sukkot. We don't want the rain to come on Sukkot. It's a siman klala, so don't do it on Sukkot. So this is Rebbe's statement over here in the Brisa. Now it's a very vague statement, and this is the way Rashi explains it. He just says when you stop asking, stop mentioning. But what he's really saying is you shouldn't mention it even on Sukkot. He's really hitting back on Rabbi Eliezer's claim. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, B'sheni b'chag umazkir, you mention Mashiv, you start mentioning it on the second day of Sukkot. Rabbi Akiva Omer b'shishi b'chag umazkir. Rabbi Akiva says on the sixth day of Sukkot. Now we have a few new opinions. Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. This is a different view than the earlier Rabbi Yeshua. This is another version of Rabbi Yeshua. A person who is the Chazan b'yom tov ha'achron shel Chag on the last day of Sukkot. So ha'achron, the Musaf Chazan Maskir mentions it. The Rishon, the Shachris Chazan Ina Maskir doesn't mention it. B'yom tov Rishon shel Pesach, the first day of Pesach, the Rishon Maskir, the first one mentions Mashav Ruach, the Shachris person mentions Mashav Ruach Mer Geshem. The Musaf Chazan does not mention Mashav Ruach Umayrid Hageshem. In Ashkenaz places, they just skip it, and in Nusach Spar they say Moirid Hatol. Now, the Gemara goes into this dialogue, back to the dialogue of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Shaper Kamalei, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Eliezer had a good claim to Rabbi Yeshua, where he says you can do it all year round. Amalach Rabbi Yeshua, and he compared it to Tchias HaMesim. So Rabbi Yeshua will answer back, Amalach Rabbi Yeshua, Bishlam Tchias HaMesim, Maskir, it's good. Tchias HaMesim you could mention, because why? The Kule Yoimaz Mane. Whenever it comes, it's its time. Can you mention rain all year round? Whenever it comes, is it its time? Didn't we learn in a Mishnah? Yatsa Nisan passes Yardu Geshamim and rains. Rain comes down. Siman Klalahim. They are a bad sign, bad omen. Because it says Haloi Katsir Chitim Hayoim. This is not appropriate. It's the time of wheat harvest. It's not a time for rain, and this had to do with Shmuel Hanavi rebuking the people about why you're asking for a king. It's not appropriate now, and he's saying that rain will fall at a time that it's not appropriate. Also, it's the harvest time. It's a punishment, and so we see that it's a siman klala. So this is Rabbi Yeshua's rebuttal to Rabbi Eliezer's claim that you could mention it all year round. Rabbi Yeshua says no, it's not. Tchias HaMesim is something all year round, but rain is not, and therefore it has its limitations. And while you're mentioning it, you mention it at the appropriate time. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, my time is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The Gemara now goes into the other views. What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Why would you start on the second day of Sukkot? Anyone? Why would you start then? So he goes into it here and he says, the Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, it says on the second day of Sukkot in the Torah, it talks about the libations and the sacrifices of each day of Sukkot. So it says on the second day, Vinis Kehem. Instead of Vinis Ka, it says Vinis Kehem, and it changes the words, adds some letters, which basically makes it plural. It implies like it's Nesachim, it's libations. What are its libations with a plural? It means the water and the wine libation. That means there's also an additional libation. It says it on the second day of Sukkot. It has that extra spelling, extra letters that makes it plural. And on the sixth day, it says unasacheha, not vinischa. On the sixth day, let me mute everyone. Got some background noise. And v'nemar b'shvi'i kamishpatam instead of kamishpat. It says these extra letters, the extra mem, an extra yud, and an extra mem. So what do we learn from that? Hare mem yud mem, hare kan mayim. You have spelled out water. So there's a hint in the Torah, and the hint begins on the second day of Sukkot, and it hints that that you have to pour water the nisach hamayim. And if there's nisach hamayim, so that would imply that we understand that that's when you would start mentioning rain. That's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's view. So mikan harikan mayim, mikan remez. This is a hint. From here is a hint. L'nisach hamayim and Torah for the water libation from the Torah. We have a hint. Umayshn b'sheni denakat. Why does he choose to start on the second day? So the Gemara says, when is it hinted to in the pasuk? It's hinted to on the second day of Sukkot. So Hilkach b'sheni mad karin, and therefore on the second day of Sukkot is when you start mentioning the rain. Rabbi Kiva Aimer b'shishi. Rabbi Kiva says on the sixth day, b'shishi b'chag mazkir, sixth day of Sukkot. Why? Shenemar b'shishi unasacheha, because on the sixth day it says unasacheha, and because it says unasacheha, which implies, and there are two nesachim b'shnei nesuchan akasim medaber. It's talking about two nesuchim for one carbon. The other verses you could say it's talking about of the libations of all the sacrifices, but here it says on one carbon unesacheha, and it's nesachim. So b'shnei nesuchan akasim medaber, the pasuk is talking about two libations. And so it hints that there's a Nisuch HaMayim, also not just the Nisuch HaYayin, not just the libation of wine, there's also a libation of water. And you have to keep in mind that all year round, there was the wine libation. So this is unique that on Sukkot, there was also a water libation, and that would be the day to mention the Mashiv Haruach, to start mentioning that Hashem gives rain, because it's the time of the water libation. You obviously see that there's a connection here between the libations, the water libation, and the mentioning rain. On Sukkot, we're judged for water. So therefore, the day that Rabbi Akiva holds is the source of the water libation is on the 6th day of Sukkot. So basically, he says mention Mashav Haruach, start mentioning that as well on the 6th day of Sukkot. The Gemara asks, how do you know that I understand there's an extra libation, but maybe they're both wine libations. How do you know to change it to a water libation? Who told you to pour water? You want to say it says 2, I understand. Good proof. You have 2 libations, but don't do water, do wine. That's the only other type of libation that we know of. So if it says here to do 2, do 2. But don't change it for water. So the Gemara answers, he holds like Rabbi Ben Seira, the Amar Remiza Maya, that there's a hint for water, but not that you would do the libation based on that hint. That hint is just telling you what it should be made of. What should the libation be made of? We turn the page now to Gimel Amud Aleph, and so he holds like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira about the water libation is hinted to in the Torah with a mem yud mem, an extra letter, when it talks about the different days of the sacrifices of Sukkot. Each day it mentions that day and that's those sacrifices, and you have a hint mem yud mem. So the Gemara asks on page 3a now, 3a. If he holds like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Nema Kavosei, let him say like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, that start mentioning the rain on the 2nd day of Sukkot. That's the way Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says. If he holds like him and he learns it from those same verses, same extra letters in the Torah, so he should hold like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Why is he starting on the 6th day to mention rain? Start mentioning it on the 2nd day, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, because that's when you start pouring the water libation. So Kasav Rabbi Akiva says no. Kiksav Nisach Yisera. When does it say the extra libation? B'shishu d'chsiv. It says it on the 6th day. Now the extra letters it mentions mem yud mem. It's not the 2nd day, this the 6th day, the 7th day mentions it throughout Sukkot. But the extra the source of actually doing an extra libation is on the 6th day, and therefore he mentions he does it on the 6th day. Now the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Reb Nosson Omer. Reb Nosson says, "Ba'kodesh haseich nesach shechol Hashem." That it says in the this is in the parsha that talks about the daily sacrifice. It says over there, Ba'kodesh, on the altar, on the holy altar, Haseich Nesech Sheichel Hashem, pour a libation of sheichar, which basically means some type of a drink that's intoxicating drink. So why does it say Haseich Nesech? So Reb Nosson has an interesting insight here. He says, you see there, B'shnei Nesuchim HaKosem Medaber is talking about 2 types of libations. Echad Nisach HaMayim, Echad Nisach HaYayin. One is the libation of water, one is the libation of wine, and that you have a hint in the daily sacrifice portion that there should be an extra water libation. So the Gemara asks, maybe they're both wine, maybe both of those libations. If it's supposed to be an extra libation of wine, then it should use the same word and double it. Hasech hasech or nesech nesech. Hasech nesech hesech or nasech nesech. My hasech nesech. Why does it switch it from a hey to a nun? Why does it switch the way it's spelled? So shma mina shamet mina chad demaya v'chad dechad. So he says it must be that there's one water one and one wine one, and therefore you have a source for the water libation in the paragraph in the Torah that talks about the daily sacrifice, it mentioned hints there about the water libation. Of course, the commentaries deal with this because that implies like maybe all year round you should have a water libation. Why are we doing it only on Sukkot? So they want to say that this opinion, Reb Nosson, must agree with the other opinions of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira that it's hinted to in that you have a source of this, that he holds, that you see the concept of the extra nisuch is on Sukkot. So he holds like one of the other views that shows that it's clear that it has to be done on Sukkot, and at the same time it's hinted to in the general portion of the daily sacrifice, but it's not brought all year round. It's only brought obviously on Sukkot. Okay, so we're going to stop over here.
Rabbi, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Something's always been bothering me. These commentaries are those of the writers of the Gemara itself. So how do we know that it doesn't show their bias?
How do we know it doesn't show what?
Their bias in what they write here.
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, give it the example. Like, who's biased about what? Like, give a name.
Well, the way they write, or in trying to explain something that's being said, how do we know that in what they write it doesn't have some kind of a bias? It's not being written in a neutral tone of just reporting
I'm
facts.
just saying, are you referring to their statements or the questions that we ask on them and we answer to answer for them?
It could be the whole thing.
The explanation of the differences.
So for example, here we have Reb Nosson's brisa, where he said Hasech Nesech, and then the Gemara asks a question, and the Gemara answers it. So are we biased? What you're saying? We're biased to try to answer up for him and not prove him wrong. Is that what you're saying? That why is the Gemara answering? Maybe it proves him wrong. Is that what
the way the language that's being used to explain what he is trying, what his meaning is. The way Rav Ashi may have written it down, doesn't that it doesn't it show the bias of Rav Ashi in writing it down in the Gemara, or how do we know that when he wrote it down, it was written in a neutral manner of just these are the facts?
But generally, the understanding is that this is the traditional. This was the tradition that was passed on, that they asked this question on him and this was answered. So, in other words, this was the understanding. This is how they answered it in the yeshiva. So Rav Ashi was just putting together these discussions. The yeshiva asked this question, they answered it. Or it was him himself that they asked and they answered it. These are the discussions. So our Gemara is just written down what they had, the tradition that they had from these.
So when he received, let's say, the papyrus from whatever school it was in which they were discussing a particular item, was in there the entire discussion, or was it in shorthand form, which Rav Ashi then had to expand and to try and explain, or was everything in there, and all he did was he copied everything and put it on the daf that we normally use?
Right. Well, I guess we could look at the Igros Rav Shri Ragoyin. That would be a good source to look up and see if it has information about that. The simple understanding is not necessarily was it even on paper. It could have been that they had memorized all these discussions, and but if it was on paper, I mean, there are opinions that said they wrote down personal notes. That even though they weren't allowed to write down Torah to publish, but they were allowed to write it down on they had personal notes. According to those opinions, maybe you're right. Maybe they did have these personal notes, and maybe they were written more shorthand. Maybe they were written more spelled out. But in any event, it would seem that like the answers that are given are often like this is like oh boy, we got so much noise here.
Thank
It
you,
would seem that
Rabbi. I have
yeah, sure, you have to go. That it would seem that these are the like obvious answers. These are these are like obvious. His opinion of Hasech Nesech. Obviously, he definitely held that it was water. Wasn't wine. Why does he? How does he know it? So it's like it's sort of like natural that this is the automatic answer that's pretty clear. It's hinted to Hasech Nesech. So it could be that it's something that's like obvious. Like that's not surprising.
That was the tradition that he was given.
But chances are it was the tradition. That what I'm just saying, like it could be that it was an answer. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess we could look it up in the Igris we're going. Maybe it would talk about these type of things.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day, everybody.